Victoria Goodwin, 25 CR 020105.
Good morning, Your Honor. David Brown on behalf of Ms. Goodwin, who's present in custody.
Good morning, Your Honor. Christopher Hammer for the state.
Good morning.
Victoria Goodwin allegedly conspired with a convicted killer to murder her husband, Ghost Adventure star Aaron Goodwin. Now she's potentially facing years behind bars. This case has all the elements of a Hollywood thriller, but for Aaron Goodwin, it is a real-life nightmare. With his estranged wife appearing in court this week, we're going to break down every disturbing detail in this unfolding case. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. So this is basically a case that reads like a script from a true crime thriller, and we have been tracking every shocking development here on Sidebar, but for Ghost Adventure star Aaron Goodwin, this is a real-life nightmare, because his now estranged wife, Victoria Goodwin, appeared in court on March 24th, handcuffed in jail scrubs, because she is facing explosive criminal charges of solicitation to commit murder and conspiracy to commit murder for allegedly plotting to have a hitman kill her husband, Aaron. Now, this hearing was just the latest in a saga that includes alleged secret prison communications, a murder for hire plot to the tune of over $11,000, a marriage that was reportedly unraveling in the darkest way possible. Now, if you're just catching up on this case, this shocking case, here's what you need to know. This, again, I'll use the term nightmare, began on March 6th when 32-year-old Victoria Goodwin was arrested in Nevada for what investigators allege was a murder for hire plot with a co-conspirator straight out of a true crime documentary. That alleged co-conspirator? Grant Amato, a name true crime fans will definitely recognize because Amato is currently serving a life sentence in Florida for the 2019 murders of his father, mother, and brother, a case that we covered extensively here on Law and Crime. Prosecutors say he killed them because they were trying to stop him from spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a webcam girl he said he was in love with, but apparently had never met in person. And his story was recently featured in a Paramount Plus documentary, putting him back in the spotlight and allegedly on Victoria Goodwin's radar. So according to an arrest report obtained by Law and Crime, investigators say Goodwin had been communicating with Amato via a smuggled cell phone from inside his prison. And there are texts that unveiled an apparent detailed alleged plot to kill her husband, 48-year-old Ghost Adventure star Aaron Goodwin, while he was filming the TV series out in California. And during Tuesday's hearing, Goodwin appeared. She looked mostly solemn, appeared to be smirking at one point as she looked back at her attorney. During the hearing, she waived her right to a preliminary hearing.
Victoria Goodwin, 25 CR 020105.
Good morning, Your Honor. David Brown on behalf of Ms. Goodwin, who's present in custody.
Good morning, Your Honor. Christopher Hammer for the state.
Good morning.
Your Honor, this was set for preliminary hearing. Originally, she had invoked her right to preliminary hearing within 15 days. She's going to waive that right today. This was called off at our request, and we're just asking for a status check in 2 weeks.
All right. That's correct, state.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Goodwin, did you hear those representations put on the record by your attorney?
Yes.
And you're agreeing to continue this for 2 weeks for
Yes.
possible negotiations? All right, so the 2-week date will be?
April 8th at 8:30.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
So she's going to be back in court on April 8th for a status check, and her bail remains set at $100,000. According to court records reviewed by the Daily Mail, as part of the conditions of her bail, she cannot have contact with her husband. But Aaron, he filed for divorce on March 12th, stating that the two have, quote, views, tastes, and dislikes that have become, quote, incompatible to the extent that it has become impossible for them to live together as husband and wife in marital harmony. There is no possibility of reconciliation between husband and wife. And in that filing, Aaron requested to have their assets divided equally while remaining in possession of a separate property that he owns. Hey everybody, this is a Law and Crime legal alert. Did you know that children are being diagnosed with serious conditions like type 2 diabetes and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and the research is potentially linking ultra-processed foods to all this? Yeah, well, Morgan & Morgan is stepping in to fight to hold these food companies accountable. With decades of experience fighting large corporations, they are ready to stand up for families who deserve justice. So if your child under 21 has been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes or fatty liver disease, then visit www.forthepeople.com/food or scan the QR code on screen to learn more. But the updates don't stop there, because Aaron apparently filed an amended complaint on March 19th, which now includes a lawsuit. And that filing, obtained by USA Today, reveals that Aaron is now suing his wife for assault, claiming that she made him fear for his safety, false imprisonment, claiming that she tried to control his movements, negligence, accusing her of behaving recklessly during their marriage, and the intentional infliction of emotional distress. The filing states Victoria's conduct was extreme or outrageous, which are the elements for that, with either the intention of or reckless disregard for causing emotional distress to Aaron. He suffered severe or extreme emotional distress as the actual or proximate result of her conduct. That's a causation element. And he's seeking more than $100,000 in damages, a swift divorce, arguing that Goodwin's alleged actions, including, quote, acting in concert with a convicted murderer, constitute a tort or a wrongful act, justifies terminating their marriage immediately. And by the way, for the first time since all of this happened, Aaron Goodwin has broken his silence, taking to Instagram to thank his fans for their support. That post from March 22nd reads, "Thank you everyone for all the love and support through this emotionally trying time. It has really helped a lot and I appreciate you all." And here's the thing. From what we could tell by the couple's Instagram photos, the two appear to have been together since at least 2018 before getting engaged in 2019 and ultimately tying the knot at Disney's Haunted Mansion, and they appear to be happy, which if these allegations are true, you gotta feel for Aaron Goodwin here, right? Because now instead of a happy ending, the relationship has imploded in what would be the most sinister, unpredictable way possible if the allegations against Victoria prove to be true. A whole lot of shocking details surrounding the alleged crime have come to light from the arrest report, including possibly a suggestion that Victoria was romantically involved with Grant Amato. We're going to get to all those details, but first I want to bring back onto the program criminal defense attorney Anthony Osso, who has a specialization in domestic violence situations. My goodness, Anthony, so good to see you. I mean, your thoughts on this? This is not the first time you've seen an alleged murder for hire plot, particularly in Texas. There are a lot of them, but this one has so many different parts to it. It's shocking, to say the least.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's already a rare enough charge to see. Yes, I've seen this kind of charge filed in the past, but again, a solicitation or murder for hire case is not nearly as common as straight murder cases. You don't see them all the time. And so when you couple that on top of the fact that this is a very popular reality TV star, with sort of an interesting show at that, it makes for a very bizarre set of facts.
Are solicitation to commit murder or conspiracy to commit murder cases, are they in a way easier for prosecutors to prove? What do I mean by that? When you have a murder case, obviously, there's forensic data, there's witnesses, there's digital data, it works. But sometimes you don't have that, and it's more circumstantial about whether somebody killed another individual or murdered another individual. Whereas with these kinds of cases, the way you ultimately arrest the defendant is there's a paper trail, there's a communication trail. You wouldn't file the charges unless you really have a clear-cut case of a plot, right? That's my take. Is that so off?
Absolutely, Jesse. I think that you don't see them filed all the time because, again, they are hard to prove. And as a prosecuting agency, you want to have that paper trail and be absolutely certain that you're filing a good charge. But it's important to keep in mind solicitation is different from conspiracy, and that conspiracy just requires an agreement, sort of helping or assisting in some form or fashion, whereas solicitation is that kind of ongoing request, payment, prodding. So that's how I conceptualize those two offenses.
And by the way, I looked it up in Nevada. I don't know if you had a chance to either, but correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe you see it in other states, including Texas. The penalty, obviously, for murder could be life in prison. But if the murder wasn't committed and you just have the solicitation or the conspiracy and steps were taken to advance it, I'm looking that it could be 2 to 10 years, 2 to 15 years. Is that right? You're not looking necessarily at life in prison. You're looking at significant prison time, but it's not the same thing as murder, right?
Not the same thing as murder. It's treated very differently. I think in Nevada, a conspiracy charge would amount to 2 to 15. And I think for the solicitation case, it's 2 to 10, which is sort of shocking when you hear what actually transpired in this case.
Well, and to be clear, look, she's innocent until proven guilty. I'm going to go in a little bit about what her arguments could be. First, I wanted to ask you, why would somebody waive a preliminary hearing? Any benefits to this?
It's just not necessary. So a lot of times at a preliminary hearing, you're just going through you're put on notice of your rights, notice of the charges against you. If a bond hasn't been set or bond hasn't been addressed, that would be a time to do it. And you enter a plea of guilty or not guilty. So oftentimes there's really no need to go through all that. And in that case, a defense attorney will oftentimes waive the preliminary hearing. I've done that in my practice before. So it just saves sort of people time in that regard.
It was a little hard to hear exactly what was being said in that hearing, but according to reporting from Courthouse News, the attorney representing Goodwin, David Brown, based on the reporting, said that his client might be interested in negotiating a plea deal. What would that look like?
It really depends. I mean, plea deals happen all the time. Actually, most cases are resolved through plea negotiations. And so he's probably going to want to get all the evidence from the state or the agency that's prosecuting Victoria, evaluate it, review it, and then go back to the drawing board and have discussions with the prosecutors about what they think is an appropriate punishment, and then counter with his arguments to try and come to a number that both sides walk away from thinking is fair.
You know, one of the most interesting aspects of this case, and it's shocking the fact that if the allegations are true, she went towards a convicted murderer who's in prison as the accomplice, and that raises a whole set of questions about why you would go to that person. But also the idea of the smuggled phone. Is this something that you see as common? Again, taking the allegations as true, that people who are locked away can coordinate crimes on the outside?
To think that any form of maximum security can prevent these kinds of things from happening, I think is unrealistic. You see and hear about contraband in not only the jails, but in prisons all the time. And so it's not uncommon for that to happen.
I want to move a little bit into we'll get back to the criminal case, but I want to move a little bit more into the civil arena. So we know that Aaron filed for divorce. I wonder if Victoria's no contact order with Aaron, does that impact her ability to participate in divorce proceedings? I mean, she hasn't made bail, and you think about that if she wanted to challenge the divorce some way or contest it. And then you have Aaron's civil lawsuit for assault, false imprisonment. You wonder how that has an effect too.
Yeah, in my experience, when there's a corresponding civil suit or family lawsuit in a criminal case, the criminal case usually stalls both of the other proceedings because you've got Fifth Amendment issues. I mean, I wouldn't advise a client to go to depositions or to make statements on the record in hearings that are necessary in civil suits and family lawsuits, or I'll advise them in those hearings to assert their right to remain silent. So oftentimes I just see that those suits are stalled while a criminal case is pending.
What did you think of the lawsuit? You know, the idea of intentional infliction of emotional distress, false imprisonment, negligence. What do you make of those claims?
I think it makes sense. I mean, I don't know what, from my perspective, I wonder what Victoria's assets look like and how that might have some sort of effect on the family law case as well as the criminal case. But I think that the torts make sense. What she did is certainly in violation of a tort law in Nevada. So it makes sense the way that they filed the claim.
I want to go through the arrest report a little bit with you to break it down and see what police say happened here. So initially, the investigating officers said that they were made aware of this alleged murder for hire scheme after they were contacted by a detective at the Florida Department of Corrections, informing them of this supposed plan involving Grant Amato, as well as an additional suspect in Nevada. And that additional suspect, Victoria Goodwin, right? But what led police to that conclusion? Well, we mentioned earlier that a cell phone was seized from Grant Amato, and investigators dug into that phone when it was seized back on October 3rd, and what they found inside was shocking. According to the probable cause affidavit, quote, analysts tagged a conversation between a female who goes by Victoria Candy and inmate Amato. Inmate Amato and Mrs. Candy discuss how much they are in love and how her husband, FH, would not accept divorce. Mrs. Candy at one point states, I'm so anxious, LOLOL. I just can't believe it's happening. Like what? The blank, the expletive. Like, how did I get to this point? Am I a bad person because I chose to end his existence, not divorce? Now, Anthony, I've talked about this before, spoken with other experts about it. What do you make of those messages? It's going to be very hard to say, I didn't write those messages. Those messages were from AI. I'm just making something up. You have to explain that in a way. And I wonder, the argument that we see a lot in these kinds of cases is, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it. There was not a real plot to kill my husband. I was expressing my frustrations. What do you take away from that?
If just having not even seen the case yet, I want to look at how they came about getting this evidence and see if there's any sort of legal argument I can make to try and suppress the evidence. But just from looking at...
You mean like a chain of custody argument?
Chain of custody, or that there were issues with the warrant, things of that nature. I mean, her standing to object to text messages found on his phone is going to be difficult. But just looking at the evidence itself, it's really hard to make an argument that I didn't mean what I was saying. This was all just sort of a fantasy. And then at the same time, try and explain the other damning pieces of evidence in the case. And so, it's easy to break a twig, but it's hard to break a bundle of twigs.
Mm. Did you come up with that? I like that. That was a good one. Can I use that in the future? I think that was good.
Absolutely, yeah.
The fact that, not code names, but Victoria Candy, FH, could there be a defense argument? How do you know what she was talking about or who was writing what?
Sure, and I think I want to look at the subscriber information, like what phone number is this coming from, who's registered to the phone, and then they can even go a step further and say, well, let's look at the geolocation on the phone. Where was she in time when these messages were sent? And if you can corroborate that she's with the phone, then it's going to be really hard to create a wedge between her and the person sending the messages. So there are a lot of tools that the investigators in their toolbox that they can use to put all that up against her.
Yeah, and further down in what the investigator uncovered reveals just how detailed the supposed murder for hire scheme really was, because according to the filing, quote, Mrs. Candy informs inmate Amato that her husband will be staying at the Best Western Plus and is with his smoking buddy. She proceeds to send inmate Amato a picture of the two of them along with a picture of a black Dodge minivan being driven by her husband. During this time, inmate Amato has been in contact with an individual whose name is redacted, who will be taking care of the situation. Inmate Amato and Mrs. Candy also have $11,515 set aside for this individual when the job is finished. Now, investigators also found messages where the two appeared to be discussing using PayPal, Zelle, Cash App to make payments. And it is noted that Amato had apparently asked Goodwin for a $2,500 PayPal payment up front to an account. Anthony, those numbers are so strange to begin, but the specificity in those details, again, I think is problematic for a defense.
Yeah, I think it's a good indicator of why the defense attorney's discussing the possibility of a plea negotiation in this case. I mean, the opening statement writes itself that days before this plan is taken out, that Victoria is sitting in bed or lying in bed negotiating the price of Aaron's head. That's insane that they've actually come to an amount of what they think his life is worth. And that could be some really damning evidence in a trial. But yeah, the specificity, it goes directly against any form of, hey, this was just fantasy or playing around. So not good.
By the way, what do you make of, if you take this as true, this love that they, it's, you and I were talking before we came on, right, about these alleged murder for hire plots, or actually convicted murder for hire plots. Love is a big factor in them, right? So if this idea that she had this love for Grant Amato or had this relationship with him and saw him on the documentary, that, as strange as that is, that's not outside the realm of what we've seen with other cases. It's almost consistent, right?
No, it's not, Jesse. I mean, it is consistent. You don't see this often, but I think when you work in criminal law and you're around the court system enough, you do run into cases like this where inmates make pen pals. And believe it or not, there are plenty of inmates serving long sentences that develop relationships and even marriages while they're in custody. And so what I've seen often in these murder for hire cases is there's typically a love wedge in the relationship. And that's where this sort of idea is birthed, to take out one's other partner.
What do you think, actually let me ask you this, why do you think the name of this alleged hitman is being redacted here? Could that mean police don't know exactly who it is? They couldn't find him yet? I'm a little confused.
They can seal, sometimes they'll seal records because just to preserve the investigation. They could still be working on whether if he hasn't been arrested yet, then they're not going to want to put him on notice that he is a suspect in the investigation, he or she. So there's a lot of different reasons that they wouldn't put that out into the public.
Now, there was more revealed about the communications that Amato had apparently had with this alleged hitman, whose identity not yet known. According to the filing, analysts tagged a conversation between inmate Amato and an individual whose name is redacted. Inmate Amato tells this individual, "Block the main number I had been texting you from." Inmate Amato also informs this individual that he will distract the husband of Mrs. Candy with a phone call. He then informs this individual, "He's asleep right now in the hotel room, brother. I need to know what is going on. Can I get an update? Was it done?" Now, that name listed in the text, Victoria Candy, is close to her actual maiden name, by the way, which is Cadenas, according to a registry reportedly reviewed by the Las Vegas Metro PD. Anthony, every time I go to one of these additional updates, it feels like it's getting worse and worse. And you're seeing, again, innocent until proven guilty, but you can see a little bit more of this, the string of this plot, of this alleged plot.
Absolutely. And not every case is a trial case. And I think that a lot of a defense attorney's job goes past being able to make a good case at trial. It's a lot of the work is done before that. And in this case, based on the new updates that you've been giving, Jesse, I think that that's probably going to be the route that this one goes. As much as everybody'd like to see how it played out in trial, it's really not a good defense case from what I'm hearing.
By the way, so police say they haven't identified this alleged hitman, and once the person's arrested and charged, you wonder, would it be possible if this person is offered some kind of deal to testify against Goodwin? And by the way, my understanding right now is Amato hasn't been charged in connection with this, but you think a deal would be worked out? You think it's important to have have this person's testimony against Goodwin?
It depends whether they think the alleged or the possible hitman is worth charging or not. Because in my eyes, Amato, what else can the state do with him? They can
don't charge him. You mean like they're not going to charge him for this?
He's already facing 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. So at this point, they're just wasting time and resources. They could put him in further security. They can, and the prison can take measures, but charging him additionally for this isn't going to benefit anybody, and it will just cost money. I would prefer to use Amato as a cooperator. And if I felt that the evidence showed that this alleged hitman was someone that we should go after, because if they haven't arrested him yet, which is why they may be sealing the record, then that's someone that's willing to commit murder for hire who's out in the free world.
Yeah, it was something I thought as well, and I'm completely speculating because I have no idea who this person is. But you have to wonder, fair argument, if this is a person who would have accepted what is, again, a relatively small payment to murder another individual. Have they done this in the past? Is that a fair assessment? I don't know. Or maybe would they be open to doing this in the future? I don't know.
I'd want to see their cell phone and their computer, and we'll look through that to find out.
Talk about an investigation, by the way. On March 6th, this is the day of Goodwin's arrest, police had executed a search warrant at her home where Goodwin had exited her house, gave an interview with detectives, and police say Goodwin explained that she learned about Grant Amato through a true crime documentary, began writing to him, describing their relationship as 2 pen pals, and this relationship, she says, started in May of 2024, ended in November, and this came to be, according to her, because she and Aaron were having problems in their marriage, though the nature of those problems still unclear. But investigators say they showed her messages that she actually admitted to remembering. But when asked about the messages regarding sending money, she apparently told police that she believed the money would be used for cell phones. But here's what she had to say about the messages surrounding this alleged plot. Quote, Victoria was eventually confronted about the text soliciting and conspiring to murder Aaron. She denied wanting her husband to be killed. She described herself of sometimes daydreaming of being in a different situation, but she no longer felt that way. She also stated she did not remember sending those particular messages. Victoria expressed her feelings of wanting to be without Aaron and with Amato, to which Amato described as a fantasy or daydreams. Now, Anthony, how damaging is this idea of fantasizing? But also at the same token, you look at all of these images of her and Aaron together where they apparently seem so happy. Would it be tough to convince a jury that this woman was capable of this?
I don't think so, because look at who she contacts to get the job done. You've got a convicted killer. You're talking to somebody that's capable. So if this was just some fantasy, not that I'm saying that one should go commit prostitution, but that's certainly a less severe crime than hiring somebody to kill your husband. She could go find somebody off the street and exchange text messages with that wasn't a confirmed killer. But she didn't do that here. She went to somebody that's serving 3 life sentences to commit this crime. So playing with fire if it was a joke.
Well, I'll tell you what, Anthony, a full transcript of this police interview is supposed to become available at a later date, so maybe we'll have you back on. We'll talk more about it. We're going to keep our eyes out for this, but my gosh, what a case. In the meantime, Goodwin remains in custody, awaiting her next court appearance. Anthony Osso, thank you so much for coming on, breaking down this case with me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, come check us out. Please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.